to introduce April Gaydos. Did I say that right, April?
Yes, you did.
Good. April is president of the Audubon de Mexico and is deeply concerned about the future of life on Earth, as we all are. She believes that people living on the planet right now have all the tools they need to transition from the doom and gloom of climate change, water scarcity, and biodiversity loss to healing, harmony, and resilience. And she is joined by Rodrigo Lopez Valdez. Rodrigo, are you her associate?
Well, we are members of the board. Yeah, I'm the secretary of the association, and yeah, we work together in Audubon.
Very good. Well, you'll excuse me for not having all of that information because I just learned right before we started the meeting that Chris would not be able to be here. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would invite you to join me in welcoming both April and Rodrigo as our guest speakers today. Welcome.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm trying to share my screen and I'm disabled access, but thank you for having me. I'm appreciate being here today and having this opportunity to talk about our future together and how we can help restore our little corner of San Miguel that's a part of the big patchwork of Earth into a better and more secure and resilient place. And I want to thank Chris McCaskill for inviting us to this opportunity. I appreciate all the work that the Rotarians do in thinking about your truths. There are truths as well at Audubon, very much so. Just sorry, I'm still the only one waiting for my. Well,
Diego, you got her up and.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, it said it was just.
There it is.
Here we are.
You're good.
Good. All right.
The magic word.
You're muted.
And I'm muted?
She's all right. Everybody can hear her.
Okay, so I'm on the microphone. Actually.
Yeah, that's why you need to keep your computer microphone muted.
Okay, right, it is now.
She's still muted to the Zoom audience.
No, we're
No.
just gonna turn our microphone.
So she's okay.
Okay, so anyway, we believe Audubon has been here since 1967 in San Miguel de Allende. We were chartered by a woman who had never really been a birder before in her life, but when she came to San Miguel, she fell in love with the birds and decided that she wanted to do something about it, about the fact that children were killing birds with slingshots and people were having problems with Parque Juarez with all the birds pooping because they were nesting, but birds needed a place to nest, so she was trying to defend them. And she just took it upon herself to lobby the U.S. Audubon Society for Audubon de Mexico to become established. And we're carrying on her legacy, not just focused on birds. We're focused on birds and nature, but most importantly, I think we're focused on people, because we are the caretakers of this planet. And we have a lot of responsibility that comes along with that. And we also have a lot of distractions in our world that keep us from fully engaging and practicing our behaviors in ways that are beneficial to nature. And we depend on nature. We need it for everything in our life, everything that is in this room, everything that's in our homes, everything around us is from nature. And I know I'm kind of speaking to the choir here, but it's kind of our philosophy of Audubon that by centering our attention on people and helping all of us spend more time in nature, engaging with nature and doing good work, on behalf of nature, we are also benefiting ourselves in many, many ways. We also, when I became president, which was 7 years ago, we drew a circle around the map of San Miguel and said, we're going to be the urban people, because cities are where most people live. And the trend is that more and more people are going to be living in cities in the future. And in fact, like our 2040 territorial plan calls for tripling the urban area in San Miguel by 2040. That's just 20 years. So we need to really pay attention to our cities. And historically, cities have been built for people. And they have created a divide between people and nature, because we have seen, I don't think we have really recognized how much we are dependent on it. And we need the space for buildings and for activities and for other things, and maybe a little park here and a big park there. But the result is that we have disrupted the natural systems on our planet through our concrete worlds. And I love cities. They're a dynamic place, a place where social interaction and cultural exchange take place. They're economic centers. They're very necessary, but they don't necessarily have to be outside of nature. And this is one of the, where we've really progressed in our thinking over the last few years, is that with the unmentionable doom and gloom things that we don't, really need to get into, but the looming threats that we're facing, climate change for one. I know I said I wouldn't mention it, but I'm going to mention climate change, desertification, which is the loss of our topsoils, which began in the 1600s when we first started creating the city of San Miguel, because the mining industry is in the area, and we deforested our land, and it changed everything. San Miguel at one point in time was a vast oak forest, if you can believe that. There's still remnant pockets on the way to Guanajuato and the Picacho Mountains, even out by La Cañada de la Virgen. But we needed the wood, and we didn't think about the impact of how that deforesting our land was going to have on our region. It changed our climate, and it changed the types of plants that what we know as native now, the mosquitoes, the huitzachis, all the pricklies, the nopales. But fortunately, it didn't really change. It changed the animal life, but we still have a vibrant animal community in San Miguel. So I kind of got off track, but I think that's a really interesting story, because it provides us with some perspective of the impact that we have in a really real and meaningful way to where we live today. So I think the impact of cities, it has its great positive benefits, and the negative side is that it's created a disconnection between people and nature. And when we don't think about nature in our lives, because our water's coming in our pipes, and we think we have nature around because we have a few trees and we have vines growing up our walls and that kind of thing, but is it the kind of nature that really nurtures wildlife and creates a dynamic system that we've disrupted through pavement and buildings and windows and things like that? So in drawing our line around the urban area, we also have come to this conclusion that what the tools that we have to help us combat, I was listing all of the threats, wasn't I? I got off track. But you know what they are. Climate change, desertification, water scarcity is a huge issue here, and I know you all are very informed on that. And biodiversity loss, and that is so critical to keeping our systems alive. And so the way that we can help to defend ourselves against these threats is by renaturing our cities. And this is something that we can all do. We can all participate in growing plants. Plants have become a very important part of our program because what is a tree without a bird? I mean, what is a bird without a tree? And really, what is a tree without a bird? They carry their seeds and help them establish themselves. We need, sorry, I got off track. Anyway, so plants are the basis of life in our perspective. And so we're wanting to bring this message through our programs. And we also want to help people make those reconnections with nature. And I think by bringing nature home in a better way, in a bigger way in San Miguel, and especially as we are developing, which is like the hugest threat, I think, because it affects everything, is that we need to grow smart. And instead of wall-to-wall buildings, we need to make space for nature. We need to plant native plants and beneficial plants in our landscapes. We need to catch our rain and keep it on our site. So important. We have so many impervious surfaces now. You see, the image of the floating heads going down San Francisco a couple years ago during the big flood. We blow out our bridges, we blow out our rivers. I saw another image of Civil Protection, their offices inundated with like 4 feet of mud from the last recent rainstorm. So our impervious surfaces, we need to re-examine how we capture rain, and we can do this through plants. And so these are, I'm going to go a little more in depthly into our programs in a minute, but that's just like the big picture. Reconnecting with nature, renaturing our cities, and thinking about how we can reduce our impact on the environment. And one of the ways that I think, for me, growing up in Oregon, I had nature all around me. I was very fortunate to live in a house that was in the woods, and we had a creek in the backyard, and I was very, very engaged. And it was, when I think back on all my memories of childhood, it had something to do with nature. But I never really was a big birder. And so it's kind of ironic that I am now the president of Audubon de Mexico. But it was here in San Miguel de Allende that I started forming a connection with birds and really re-engaging with my connection with nature. It's very heart-centered. I know all the issues on an intellectual basis, but I work through my heart. And so Rodrigo is going to talk about birds and how they can be everyone's gateway drug to nature and to renaturing our cities.
Okay, shall I? Let me share my screen. Yeah. Thank you. Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for having us here. Thank you, April, for inviting me. It's really a pleasure to be in this, my first Rotary event. I feel very, blessed to be here with you guys. So I have a few slides here to share in order to add or underline what April just shared with us. As people live more urbanized lifestyles, there is potential to lose daily contact with nature, diminishing access to the wide range of associated health benefits of interacting with nature. The most common form of nature experience involves not being in nature. That's because there are ways in which we can connect with nature that doesn't really need us to be there in the field, right? And still it's beneficial for us to see through the window, or to be planting in our garden, or to have a pot. That's a way to connect with nature. Nonetheless, most of the people, that's the only is how far they go when it comes to connection with nature. And even though it is a good step towards the right direction, it really is really not bringing people into nature and bringing all the benefits.
That's interesting.
People who experience nature regularly are the exception as opposed to the norm. So there are fewer people on the planet really connecting with nature, going for a hike in the woods, looking for birds and such. The truth is, April mentioned that most people live in urban areas. We're talking about 70% of the population will live in urban areas in 30 years. Deconstructing nature dose will allow the development of targeted health outcomes. So there are even ways for us to approach nature. It's interesting that during the pandemic, terms like forest bathing or forest therapy became very, very, popular, especially given the very, very and alarming levels of depression and psychological problems due to enclosure. But connecting with nature gives all sorts of benefits, and it is proven scientifically. I'm just gonna let them there.
You're not just making this up?
I'm not. I have all the references there, all the studies. There are a lot of benefits, even reducing allergies, which may sound counterintuitive. Like, okay, I'm gonna be nature, isn't gonna be the other way around. There are studies that point towards that. Now, talking about cities, within an urban population, a variation in daily nature experiences is driven by two factors. One is opportunity, and the next one is orientation. And opportunity consists essentially in more green infrastructure. That is, to have more places that are related to nature, such as gardens for pollinators, orchards and schools, healthy trees. It's great that we have a lot of trees, but we also have a lot of trees that are sick and that are dying. Good trails for hiking, a boathouse and kayaks like we do have here in San Miguel. And the other element would be orientation. It's not enough to have all the infrastructure if we don't orient efforts and we don't orient people to connect with nature. This towards nature-based activities, such as gardening program, and all these are Audubon, our programs, right? Coincidentally, gardening program, kids in nature program, where we have developed orchards in schools and pollinator gardens for children in schools. Then our new program called the Tree Cleanup Program that consists in cleaning the trees in the areas from these epiphyte plants that kill the trees, bird watching and kayaking. I'm putting both bird watching because that's what I was invited to talk about. And here we go. So just in a nutshell, why are birds important? I think this has been shared in the past, especially if you like birds. Probably you've seen this before. I'm going to try to go fast here, but birds they spread the seeds. They're pollinators. We're in such a problem with pollinators right now. They also help us with pest control. They're symbols, they're elements for culture. And very importantly, birds help connect people with nature. Because how are we going to get all those benefits for our health if we don't find a way to connect with nature? And certainly birds are an excuse for many of us to go out in the field. The birds also recycle material. Some people say they are the voice of nature, and certainly. And they also inspire us, our aesthetics, to develop aesthetics. I'm just gonna continue. I was asked to share a little bit of my story I don't want to spend too much time, probably a couple of minutes. I spent 10 years of my life working in a telecommunication company in Mexico City. And I can recall that since I was a kid, I really loved nature, even more so than going playing soccer with my neighbors. So after career and after getting a job at telecommunications, I started to feel uh, really bad, like I really needed to connect with nature. Long story short, after some introspection, I decided I wanted to start a business that had to do with nature and with traveling. That's how I found Audubon de Mexico in San Miguel de Allende, because there's no other place in Mexico where Audubon has a chapter. And so I found my first field guide, Birds of Mexico, and I was really surprised to discover that we have, hundreds of different species of birds, even in Mexico City, let alone, in the rest of the country. I needed to find also a way to change my job for a new way to make an income, and I discovered that bird watching tourism is an important niche. Nowadays, $41 billion are spent annually in the US by birders just to do that activity. And it's growing, is the branch of ecotourism, the fastest growing, and also is the most profitable. But also, if it's well run, it's one of the ways in which so-called ecotourism can be really be run in a proper, sustainable way. So after taking the leap, and I'm glad to see, I'm glad to show you in this photograph. I'm sure there are members of the Rotary Club here. Liz, I think Liz is behind Pat Donahue. You can see Liz in the center. You see Marlene, and then this white bar, and there's Liz in the back, and then probably other members of Rotary here. Anyway, birding, nature really changed my life, and I was happy that after being 10 years in the telecommunications, I was able to move to San Miguel and start running tours, eco-tours through Audubon. Now, talking about what I was asked to talk about, the birds of San Miguel de Allende. Well, I want to share that we in Audubon have books about birds, but this particular book you can find at the Botanical Garden was a book that was edited and published by the Botanical Garden, but it was authored by Landy. Landy is an ornithologist. She's from San Miguel de Allende and did a wonderful job. So if you want to have like a book of birds of, especially San Miguel region, that is comprehensive, I really recommend you get this book, Guía de Aves del Charco del Ingenio, because I think the Botanical Garden in San Miguel represents most of the habitat that we have here in town, although still missing some elements like the probably bodies of water, riparian ecosystem towards the south, etc. But this is a comprehensive book. And talking about species of birds, well, we have registered so far 315 species of birds in the municipality. This is only the municipality, so there are plenty of birds, to find if you like birding, if you like an excuse to go out and feel and connect with nature. There are 315 reasons to go out and enjoy and connect with nature. As you can see here in this ranking of the top hotspots for bird watching in the municipality, the Botanical Garden is number one. That's where for decades, Audubon de Mexico has done a lot of the birding efforts. So most of these records that are historical about how many species are in the Botanical Garden are the results of the efforts of birders, of members of Audubon, that have keep a careful record of what species of birds can be found there. And let me tell you that if we were to compare the bird watching scene in Mexico, San Miguel de Allende, it's been like a leader, it's been putting an example, and that's thanks to the influence of the expat community. And I want to thank you guys for bringing that influence into my country. Then we have the city, then we have the dam, then we have the Las Colonias area and the Botanical Garden, and you can see the bars over to the right and how many species every one of those so-called hotspots, how many species of birds it has. Then Cañada de la Virgen, I actually also recommend that site. It needs more exploration. It's the ranch, not the archaeological site, but the ranch. And our beloved Parque Juárez, Benito Juárez, and so on. You know, there are a lot of hotspots, but these are the most important hotspots for birding or bird watching in the city. Okay, and I'm just gonna close with some images of nature scenes of our municipality. Yeah. One of my favorite birds, the vermilion flycatcher. Some birders in action, some birds, some flowers, roadrunner, and a stone. A blue grosbeak over to the right. Orioles, curved thrashers, cactus wrens, white-eared hummingbird, lark sparrow, acorn woodpecker, little frog, northern harrier, cinnamon drum, seed eater. Thank you very much.
Where do you buy that guide?
At the botanical garden. Yes.
And we also have, you did not mention,
I see Liz
our
Liz
hand
Powell.
guide,
Hey, Liz Powell.
which is 81 most common birds of San Miguel, and it's like a really great pocket guide because you can carry it around with you. You can keep it in your drawer in your kitchen. When you look out your window, you see a bird and like, okay, what is it? Yeah, it has pictures. It's good.
Where do you find that?
Right here. In my hand.
If not right here, then where? Just
Through us. Through us. Yeah. Right. So, okay, good. So I want to talk a little bit about our programs and how we can all connect up with nature in better ways for, as Rodrigo mentioned, for not only for our health, our mental health, and the health of our community in a physical way, and the health of our wildlife. And these images represent the things that are our values. For me, a vision of children being able to play in their rivers is like the iconic image in my mind of a healthy environment. And right now, that's not what we have, but we can get there. People taking care of our trees, taking care of our trees on public lands because they're part of our community and they need our help. People taking care of wildlife. I don't know if you could ever get a bird to eat out of your hand, but it's a nice image to think about. Teaching our children well, helping them engage with nature, because one of the things that I found out when we, through our Ninos and Naturalistic program, is that most of our kids do not spend any time in nature. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Some of it's we don't really have a lot of big open nature for them to explore. Others, parents are worried about their kids being outside playing alone, or even with their friends. They don't know a difference between a black grackle and a black crow. All crows are, all birds are black, or all birds are this. So helping them to learn where their food comes from by helping them grow their own food, and then providing habitat for wildlife in our city, in our yards, and engaging people to create a network of habitat throughout our region. So when we talk about connecting with nature, Audubon programs, we have recreation programs. We have a fleet of kayaks. Anyone can come out as soon as we get some water in the pressa, which we're working on right now. Not Audubon, but the powers that be. I think the presa is starting to come back. It's just a really peaceful, wonderful way to spend some time. And I don't know about all of you, but I assume that water, especially in the high desert, just makes you feel good. And it's a lot of habitat for birds on the Presa Allende, because we have a very unique feature, and you can see the elements there. How often do you see trees in the middle of a lake? Not. So when we have high water years, the river is actually covered up by the Presa Allende. And we can paddle through up the channel of the river, and we're just surrounded by trees. And it's a really great experience. And you can also walk out to along the Rio Laja. There's 32 kilometers of community trails that follow the river. We have a map on our website that shows different places where you could walk and where you can park your car, and kind of imagery of what you're going to see. So if you're interested in doing that, has anyone, who's been to the Rio Laja? Okay, fine. All right, so, I mean, our kids in our programs didn't even know we had a river. Get out and go birding with us. It's a wonderful way to connect with nature. You don't really have to love birds to get into it. You can just be along for the walk. Right now, the wildflowers are fully in bloom, and it's just beautiful. And as I said, I think opening up our world to nature, opening our world to birds, is a perfect way to help us start re-engaging with. And we start noticing more details about the world around us. And in our own backyards, if we look, we see. Thank you. Water and safety and space. Come out and garden with us. Learn about gardening for pollinators and wildlife at our garden at Parque Juarez. It's a great way. Every Thursday morning from 9:30 to about 11:30, we trim plants, plant new plants, and plant what we're going to do next, and look at the butterflies and check for caterpillars. It's really a wonderful time.
You don't have any programs to teach some of the gardeners in San Miguel how to prune?
No, but through our Save a Tree program, we are going to be having clinics on how to prune. So your gardeners are welcome to come out for that.
Pretty widely, so we could those of us that have gardeners or in communities with gardeners could send them to one.
Sure. Yeah, that'd be great. And you could come with them.
Yeah,
I'm trying to engage you with nature here.
I still would go.
Okay. So, I think both Rodrigo and I have mentioned already this connection with nature, but I cannot emphasize how important it is and how we have become, as a society of humans, so removed from nature. Yeah, maybe we go out and spend a day or go to the mountains or take a drive and or walk down the street and say, oh, what a beautiful vine. But to really see ourselves as part of nature and engage in nature in ways that demonstrate reciprocity. And I've been thinking about this notion of reciprocity because nature gives to life. It's all about this network that supports life. And we humans have stepped outside of that. And there's a lot of reason. Being a human is a very distracting business. There's a lot of things to do just to support ourselves and our emotional need for relationships and all of that. But I think if we could find that, integrate ourselves better with nature, that we're going to find more happiness, peace, calmness, a sense of well-being, and knowing that we're doing something that's good for our future and the future generations that are coming. Because we can do it. We have that power. Just by simply replanting our cities and rethinking how we develop here, we can make a big difference in the health of our environment and the health of people. Not to mention the future of the planet. So one of the first programs we started when I became president was the Ninos and Naturalistic program. And this was to connect kids with nature and then to help them find their power and in the world and their purpose. And we've had an amazing experience. Of course, we haven't been with them for a whole year now, a year and a half almost. And we don't know if we're going to be back in the fall. But, and we're saddened that they've been taken into a digitalized world for their education. But hopefully we'll get back into contact with them, perhaps not this fall, but in the January, and reignite our program. But our program is about helping children find wonder in nature, to see that they as people have a connection to it and a responsibility to it, and finding purpose by planting a garden, viewing the world through the eyes of a bird, to develop empathy for other living things, to grow their own vegetables. And look at these kids. The one on the left is one of those, he's a beautiful, beautiful kid, but he doesn't do well in school. Can't sit there and listen to why Allende saved Mexico and, you know, whatever it is, it just doesn't resonate with him. But once we started the gardening program at the school, he became a different child at school. He became a leader. He became an inspiration. We had a group of people come from Oregon. We have something called a twinning program. It's Aves Compartidas, where children in Oregon are learning the same curriculum as our children. And then they send letters back and forth and videos, and it's a cultural exchange, and it's all around migratory birds. So using birds as a tool to bring people together across borders. And Cesar was like the ambassador for the garden. He was showing everyone through the garden. He was telling them how, you know, what they were growing, you know, and all about it, really coming into himself. And it was such an important experience, I think, for him to see the value that he has in this world, and to see that he was gaining the respect of his peers, who only knew him as the kid that was always having to go outside and sit in the chair because he was disrupting the class. When at one time he was inside the classroom disrupting the class, and the teacher said, "I'm sorry, you're not going to be able to go on the Audubon field trip." All the other kids were like, "No, Cesar's got to go. He's our leader. He's so important." So I think, you know, we're trying to present a life-changing experience for kids by giving them new ways to test themselves in the world, new ways to think about the world, and open themselves up to their connections to nature. They created salads out of their garden greens that they grew, and they invited the parents to come, and they made the salads themselves. And the parents said to us, "Well, I would have served more salads at home. I didn't think my kids liked lettuce or greens." And through these gardens, we're helping kids realize where their food comes, not necessarily grocery store. And we're learning about how insects benefit the garden and how grasshoppers do not, and how to control them without using pesticides, and creating good practices of stewardship. We built in a garden in another school. This was a pollinator garden, and the kids got involved with building the fence, painting, planting, the whole everything. They're fully engaged in the whole project. And not only that, but we have them help us plan what's going to be in the garden. So they feel fully invested. This is an example of a pollinator garden that we have at Nueva Sunday School in San Luis Rey. And we've had caterpillars, a monarch caterpillar hanging from the fences, not the caterpillars themselves, but the chrysalis. We're creating an outdoor living laboratory for them to investigate nature and connect with it. And you know, through our program, we're trying to green their schools and create habitats that then become part of the greater habitat network that we envision for our city. And this is sort of our mantra: help children love the world before we ask them to save it. And so I feel very strongly about that we don't talk about the issues so much that are the threats that I didn't really want to talk about today, but by helping people love nature and to feel integrated and part of it is the pathway to then doing good things for nature so that it can do good things for us and for the sake of wildlife too. Gardening. So we have a garden at pollinator garden at Parque Juarez. Has anyone visited it? Yeah, 2 people.
When you
At
say
Parque Juarez.
pollinator garden, what exactly
Yeah.
do you mean by that?
Well, it's a place where we've planted plants that are nectar bearing or nectar producing, and then attract butterflies, hummingbirds, and bees primarily. Pollination is one of the biggest components of life. 80% of our world's plants are flowering plants, and of that, about 60% rely on animal pollinators. You know that our bees are in trouble because of pesticide use and other issues, but this is a way to create, as the urban center has sort of fragmented our natural habitats. If we can create a network of pollinator gardens throughout our city, then these creatures have a place to travel through, to even live out their lives. But we're sustaining life in that way, and we're helping them help us grow our vegetables and produce our flowers and all the wonderful things they do for great plants. Because I should really talk a little bit more about plants, because trees and plants create climate, they create humidity, they provide shade to shelter us, and they create little micro habitats for insects to develop, which feed birds, and birds feed other creatures, and on in this beautiful web of life that we're involved in. But so when I say they're the basis of life, they're the only creature on the planet that can make their own food from sunlight. So from there, from us consuming plants and from other animals consuming plants, and then consuming the animals that consume the plants, we have life. And so if we didn't have plants, we wouldn't have life, period. So these are just a way that we think of our work as in creating habitat, but also educating people on the kind of habitats that they can create in their own yards. Or how much time? Like un poco. Okay. Sorry. I thought I was only gonna talk for like 5 minutes. But so this is a demonstration garden as much as it is a habitat garden. And we have signage within it that talks about the different plants. We have signage that talks about the different aspects of pollination and the relationship between plants and animals and people. And we see beautiful butterflies like this swallowtail here. And we have fun gardening every Thursday morning. Right now, we're getting ready to create a new area of the garden. And the top right photo is a work day that we had. We call it Big Deep 3, where we have installed rain gardens to capture water, stormwater, and help it infiltrate into the soil. And this is just sort of a model program, because what we're envisioning is that we can put more of these kinds of rain gardens throughout our community to help us prevent flooding, capture rain to benefit our soils, and garden at the same time.
We have a project here, an online project of beekeeping, and we've been establishing beekeeping communities throughout the San Miguel and Dolores area.
Right.
Would you be willing to go to some of those communities and just talk about how they can nurture the bees in the
Yes.
community with
With
plants?
plants, yes. And that reminds me, the importance of native plants. I always thought, there's two sides of this story. There are a lot of plants. First of all, we need to think about plants in terms of, are they beneficial? A beautiful geranium adds a lot of color to your garden, but it doesn't add any value for life. So sure, have a couple pots of geraniums, but plant plants that produce seeds and berries, and that can be structures for insects to grow, because most of our birds, especially in the urban area, are insect eaters. And fruit. Yes.
People, a lot of people have not a lot of room in their yards, but they do have some pots.
Yeah.
If you wanted to grow some plants in pots that were specifically pollinator plants, that would attract, bees and hummingbirds, what would be 2 or 3 of the best plants to put in your pot?
Well, salvias, because first of all, they're a native or hybrid of native plants. And there's a whole bunch of varieties. I highly recommend a visit to Frankie's Vivero, which is above the Red Cross of the Libramento Zavala. They have a lot of native plants there. I think lavender has done well here, and that it's not a competitive species for our native plants. Bees love it. Aloe, they are easy to care for, and they have beautiful yellow blooms on tall, spiky blooms that everybody loves. And especially, you'll even find orioles in your garden, because they are nectar eaters. So they're good for hummingbirds, they're good for bees, then they're good for butterflies. And then lantana is just an awesome plant. It grows so readily, and we attract more butterflies through the lantana in our garden than anything else, I think. So, and I thank you for that very good point. I was going to get to that later, but yeah, you don't have to have a yard. You could even just have a windowsill. The other thing that we can do to connect with nature through Audubon, if you want, is to help wildlife. We have a program where we care for injured birds. We've raised that barn owl, Cleo, on the left, and then released her into the wild. That was our second barn owl. The top right is just a recent
Cattle egret.
Thank you. Cattle egret that basically severed the muscle in its wing somehow, falling on a branch or whatever. And some people found it in Los Frailes and called us up. So we took it to our wildlife care expert, who has kept it alive and is going to keep it for the rest of its life, because it will never be able to fly again. But it will be in good hands, and they have a nice little pond that they can play in. And then opossums, we have a big group of people that are saving opossums here. I have 2 that you can see the bathroom at my house right now. Cars and opossums are not a good fit. A lot of times these babies are just tiny orphans that the mother has been killed, or sometimes they just fall off the mom's back and people find them and they want to, they're like, once we find an animal in need, our inclination is to save it, right? So what are we gonna do with it though? We don't, so we've been lucky to have people in Audubon or affiliated with Audubon that know how to care for wildlife, but we need more people to help out, especially during nesting season when a lot of birds fall out of the nest, more like fledgling season, and they need this interim care. So contact us if you do find a wild bird or wild animal. Get involved with us to help us. Like I had 2 wild bird rescues back to back a couple weeks ago, and I spent all my time just running back and forth to the vet and doing this and that and the other thing. I could really use some help with other people just helping to facilitate getting the animal from its location to a care facility. And it makes you feel good, and it's very cool. Raising the owl, that was the best. Save a tree. Okay, so our trees are, especially our native trees, the mesquites, the huasaches, are especially attractive to paisley, which is an air plant that affixes itself to the tree as just a support system to survive, but it doesn't take any nutrients from this tree itself. So in small quantities, paisley is not a problem at all. But in large quantities, like you see on this tree here, it's killing that tree. And we need trees. They provide oxygen. There's probably the most important plant on the planet. But anyway, we need our trees and we can't afford to lose them. So we started a program where volunteers can come out and in Parque Landeta and down by the Presa, remove the paisley from the trees. If you don't like working from a ladder, it doesn't matter. There's plenty of paisley within arm's reach from the ground. But if you're gonzo and want to get in the ladder, great. This tree that I've been showing you is how it looked just 2 months later. So we're seeing remarkable results. Bad thing is, we've counted over 2,000 trees that need our help in both those locations together, combined. That's a lot of trees. So we need a lot of volunteers.
April,
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but they're gonna need this room.
Okay, I'm done.
Oh, well, that worked out good.
I mean, I could say, okay, so these are upcoming Save a Tree events. And we welcome your participation. We're passing the information along. I didn't put up our website, but it's Audubon de Mexico .org. So you can find out more information about what we're doing and how you can get engaged. And I just hope that all of you find a message of hope within what we're doing, and we'll start gardening and thinking about how you can help.
Thank you.
All right.
It might interest you to know that, and maybe you already do know, that this gentleman right here leads our tree planting project. So we go
Excellent.
around and- how many trees did we plant?
So far 13, but we're still going this year. We go through the rainy season. And for just a minor donation of 2,000 pesos per tree, I would be happy to plant oak trees on the Audubon.
You're planting oaks?
I plant all kinds of trees.
Okay.
I plant a variety of species, but you
Right.
specifically mentioned oaks.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that. And because that's, I think, our next step after we're done with cleaning, we want to get into planting.
Well,
Thank
April
you.
and Rodrigo, I really appreciate you joining us today. I'm sorry that Chris couldn't be here to introduce you. But in appreciation for your appearance here today, look, suitable for framing, and our club secretary is going to email these to you. We present certificates to both of you for a donation of 10 polio immunizations made in your honor to Rotary's End Polio Now campaign. We thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
And
Thank you for having us.
ladies and gentlemen who are here in person, we appreciate you being here too. Got a great program next week. Be on the lookout for it in your email. Right now, meeting is adjourned. Thank you.